In Lamplight City, you take on the role of Detective Miles Fordham as he solves cases on the side, while he's sidelined from the police force after the death of his partner Bill, whose voice Miles can still hear in his head. This has driven him to such despair that he has to resort to opiates and booze just to sleep at night. Talk to witnesses and reveal the events behind the mystery of the cases, and in the end, you will hopefully discover the truth behind the murder of your best friend.
Wake up, sunshine.
Haven't I told you not to call me that?
What's the matter? Have a rough night?
Bit too much Bollingworth ale is all. That stuff really creeps up on you.
Sorry I couldn't join you, but I was long overdue for a quiet night in with Addie.
That's fine. There'll be plenty of other opportunities.
Now graphically, the game is pure 1990s, despite being released in 2018. The retro pixel art style evokes games like Monkey Island, and the dialogue scenes take their props from Gabriel Knight, with the characters talking portraits. There's lots of areas to visit, and they're all well detailed. From a wealthy baroness's mansion to an airship yard, the steampunk aesthetic carried through every single scene in Lamplight City. The character models are excellent, and the portraits during the conversations are superb, even if they move a little awkwardly when they talk. In terms of sound design, Lamplight City distinguishes itself from the rest of the indie game point-and-click crowd by being fully voiced by a very good cast. With over 50 voice actors featured, it's truly remarkable that there is no weak link. Lamplight City sounds like it was voiced by actual talented actors rather than whoever the designers managed to hit with a stone thrown out of the studio window. It helps that the script is decent too, with the majority of the lines sounding like dialogue that would actually be uttered by humans in the real world. The environmental music and sound are spot on as well, and it helps give the impression of a world that is real and lived in.
Sometimes certain types of flowers are unavailable or arrive in poor condition. These things happen. Then 2 weeks ago on Wednesday, it happened again. But this time I noticed something rather odd.
Go on.
When I opened the shop, there were 6 crowns and 10 shillings on the counter. That's exactly the cost of 2 orders of lilies. Last Friday, it happened yet again.
Wake up, sunshine.
The storyline is focused almost entirely on Miles and his struggles to solve cases he may or may not care about, and solve the one case that he does care about, Bill's murder. Along the way, you'll encounter several different subplots running through each of the cases. These include a character performing experiments with an energy known as aerthricity, which is an obvious analogue for electricity, a group protesting the emergence of steam technology called the Redites, referencing the Luddites, and throughout the game, the divide between the working class and the rich aristocracy comes up all the time. However, none of these have any effect on the game or the cases. They exist purely as on the periphery of the main storyline, which is squared firmly on Miles. Although to give a wider sense of the world, they ultimately don't matter. Framing the story like this is a bit of a double-edged sword. It fits with the realism the game is going for, as Miles doesn't care about these things, neither should you. While this leads to Miles being an incredibly fleshed out character, he's flawed yet likeable, it also leads to the aforementioned subplots just petering out with no resolution. A lot of effort went into their creation, and it seems a shame to underuse them, especially when a lot of them are so interesting. The only real subplot that affects the ending is the one involving Miles' wife, Adelaide. She's a wonderfully written character, and it's compelling to see how their marriage handles the strains of Miles' addictions. As a black character, she also helps the game touch on the themes of racism and sexism in some interesting ways.
What's the point? I've got no need to go peacocking around town. You're the only girl for me.
I like it when you're clean cut. It brings out your eyes.
The way my eyes have been looking lately, I think it's best to keep them hidden. I've still got that song you sang last week at the Rutherford stuck in my head. You were amazing.
Thank you, Miles. That was a lovely evening. I always enjoy it when Joseph brings out his violin and we can relive the old days.
Certainly nicer than when he spends hours telling the exact same story whenever you visit.
They were very glad to see you, you know.
Heard of her?
She's a constant source of information and gossip. However, the game subtly points out that she only hears the stories she does hear because the wealthy white women that she works for speak as if she's not there and don't even consider her, even when what they're talking about involves crimes like murder. In one especially great example, Miles needs her to distract the police officer so he can investigate a crime scene. However, instead of helping her out, the cop actually begins racially abusing her, leading Miles to storm in and spark the prick out.
Dupre's son Andrew was quick to suspect foul play. He accused a man named Albert Martin, and the police arrested him.
So where do I come in? Sounds like the case has already been solved.
I strongly suspect that Martin is innocent, especially considering the talk of him having used black magic on Dupre. The police feel they have enough evidence to convict, so they're not bothering to investigate any further.
In terms of gameplay, Lamplight City is point and click stripped down to the bare bones. There's no text parser, no action buttons, you don't even have an inventory. Instead, Miles keeps notes in a casebook that tracks the progress of the various leads you'll have throughout the case. There's even an achievement for completing the game without looking at it once. I like this aspect. It eliminates one of the bugbears of point and click games, the inventory rub, where you wind up trying every item on every other item to see if something clicks. It works so seamlessly that I didn't even notice the lack of an inventory at all. The main investigation mechanic is dialogue. You'll progress through the cases by questioning witnesses, chasing down leads and stringing clues together. More often than not, you'll be seeking to poke hole in the suspect's statements to get them to reveal more information. And it's in this mechanic that's the main selling point of Lamplight City resides. It's a game where it's okay to fail. Essentially, what this means is that you're free to draw your conclusions and solve the cases any way you see fit. Accuse the wrong person, or just give up and declare it unsolvable, the game will continue along with the consequences of your mistakes affecting the next case. For example, the uncle of a suspect whom I'd accused of attempted murder in one case ran the bank where a suspect in another case worked. When I tried to enter to question him, I was promptly thrown out, rendering that avenue of information dead. Another aspect that will trip up a lot of players is the actual dialogues themselves. Many adventure or RPG players will be used to just running the gamut of every dialogue tree in every conversation, but that is a recipe for failure in Lamplight City. Say the wrong thing or offend any of the witnesses, and they'll just simply stop talking to you, cutting off any vital clues they may have revealed. It's a good way of forcing the player to focus on what's being said. In one case, I revealed that I was working for the police to a woman running an opium den, and I was surprised when she promptly locked the door and refused to speak to me. Other games had conditioned me to just clicking every option in conversations that I never gave a thought to how a drug dealer might react to finding out that I fucking worked for the police.
I'm involved.
Oh, hello. Are you the new servant?
No, I'm Miles Fordham. I'm a private investigator looking into your mother's attempted murder.
How did you know I was her son? Oh, of course. You must have sensed it with your detective's intuition. I should have guessed by that giant head of yours.
Are you feeling all right, Mr. Montgomery?
Yes, I'm fine. Much better than when those pesky police officers were snooping around earlier. But I like you.
Unfortunately, it's these great ideas that shine a light on the less favourable aspects of the game, namely its lack of depth. With only 5 cases, or if you mess them up, these gimmicks aren't given enough room to breathe and really affect the game. There's only a handful of lines that you can say that'll cause characters to stop talking to you, and they're all pretty obvious if you think about them. Lamplight City is also one of the few games I've ever played that's gotten easier as it goes on. The first case is brilliant and showcases everything, just how many ways you can screw up, with the true criminal only becoming clear if you nail everything just right. After this, the difficulty level of the cases drops dramatically, with the final few having culprits that were so obvious I honestly thought the game was setting me up. Much like the subplots I mentioned before, it feels like a waste of the unique gimmicks that so much effort has gone into developing. In conclusion, there's an awful lot to like in Lamplight City. It's a well-made game with exceptionally absorbing characters and superb voice acting. The cases are all very interesting to work through, and the story threaded through them is a compelling one. The game's artwork is superb with an atmospheric soundtrack as well. And while I feel like the game sells itself short in some areas and doesn't have the depth needed to do justice to all its fantastic ideas, it is a unique experience and one that should be played by all adventure game fans.